The British Dynasty has a rich history with regard to their wealth, and Queen Elizabeth II was lucky enough to inherit quite a lump sum of this money. Just one look at her and it's pretty evident that she belongs to the royals. Hello folks, and welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we'll show you Queen Elizabeth II's various prized possessions on which she spends lots of money. So let's get right into it. The Queen loves to spend her billions on a lot of things, but the apparel that she wears is something that she spends quite a lot of her money on. To top that off, her jewelry and other accessories usually cost her thousands of millions of pounds, and the paparazzi and other fans of hers always keep a lookout for any new piece that she may be donning anytime she steps out in front of the public. It's pretty evident that the Queen has quite a lot of luxurious assets, right from the palaces to diamond-studded crowns. But it's also important to note that the Queen is quite smart with her money, and she prefers to spend her billions in the right way. With the pandemic having affected us all, the Queen too was affected because of it. A lot of her money comes from the public, and since the pandemic took a hit on the public, she was financially hit too. You all must be aware that Queen Elizabeth II has some of her money coming from the Crown Estate. For those of you who don't know what the Crown Estate is, well, it's a group of properties or pieces of land in the UK that are owned by the British monarch. This is technically the sovereign's public estate, and it's not a part of the roster of private estates that the monarch owns, nor is it part of the properties that the government holds. Queen Elizabeth II does get a certain share of money from the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate, which has most of its lands and properties in central London, is said to hold a net worth of a whopping $18 billion. The Queen doesn't get all this money, but only a fraction of it in the form of an annual sovereign grant. The pandemic did affect the Queen, as she mentioned earlier, so let's take a quick look at how much she made from the Crown Estate prior to the pandemic. So in the financial year 2019 to 2020, the Queen made £82.4 million. So if we're going to convert that to the US dollars, that would be around $116 million as a total and $1.74 from each British subject. Furthermore, British royalty has garnered a major following, and many people look up to them and are heavily intrigued with their lives. The royal family has monetized this interest of theirs and has tried to maintain their fan base. Tourists from different parts of the world visit the UK, and them visiting the UK benefits the annual accounts of the royal household. They come to visit the country for a lot of reasons. One of the major reasons being visiting royal palaces and other buildings of historical importance. The money that's collected here goes to the royal accounts. With tourists pouring into the country, the royal accounts were positive. But the pandemic changed all of that, and according to the keeper of the Privy Purse, the lack of tourists during this period of time has left a gaping hole of around $45 million in the books of the royal accounts. This poor performance has continued on into 2021 as well, but a positive change in this regard is expected to take place in 2023. That is if recession and inflation do not ruin everything. Only time will tell if the royal accounts will improve or not. But let's take a step back from the royal accounts and see how the Queen spends her billions. It is the job of the Queen to welcome guests to her palaces. Hence, whenever royal dignitaries and heads of state come to visit her, she pulls out a huge sum of money to cover up for their stay. So in order to cover the cost of these guests, the sovereign grant allows the Queen to welcome these guests at her cost. This means that the running expenses, staff costs, and any other costs are covered by the sovereign grant. You all must know that the Buckingham Palace hosts some of the biggest and most famous parties in the world. And to do so, the Queen shells out millions to keep up the standard of the party as well, to enjoy the occasion to the best. Prime ministers, presidents, monarchs, heads of state, and many other dignitaries are not cheap to entertain, and the housekeeping and hospitality that the Queen provides for them are said to cost a whopping $3.7 million. Just like we all have basic accessories that we need on a regular basis, the Queen and the people at her palace also need them. These items could include stationery, food, clothes, and other basic amenities that one needs to run a household. The royal accounts have a separate account for housekeeping and hospitality. All the food and drinks that are bought into the palace are calculated under this account. Apart from the regular day-to-day consumption of feeding the royal family, as well as the staff that resides in the palace is known to host quite a few parties quite regularly. And the cost of food and drinks in this party is also calculated as part of the royal accounts. The main reason why it's calculated here is because these parties take place in property that is part of the royal family's property portfolio. If we're to look at the parties that took place at the Queen's various residences pre-pandemic between 2018 and 2019, there were 240 receptions, 158 lunches, 9 garden parties, and 75 dinners. All these parties did not take place at one palace, but were spread out between Windsor Castle, the Palace of Holyrood House, Buckingham Palace, and St. James Palace. The number of parties dropped quite drastically during the pandemic, and this also happened to reduce the Queen's expenditure during this time span. But we're expecting this to go back to how it was pre-pandemic by 2023. Apart from all of this, stationery, postage, and printing done by the Queen come up to $1.55 million. Another $848,000 is spent on cleaning and laundry. Wine and spirits cost them another $565,000. Even though the Queen is quite aged, she loves to travel a lot. Her travel needs are quite different from a regular person's travel needs, as hers is private and comes with a high level of security. The Queen travels for quite a few official engagements, and all this is covered by the sovereign grant. This includes all her train costs, plane costs, and costs that are incurred by the other automobiles that she uses. As for her train journeys, she's a big fan of them and at times uses the public train system. But if she's to travel longer distances, she uses her royal train to commute. All in all, her total travel costs are said to come up to an average of a massive $7.5 million. This was again calculated pre-pandemic, and the value right now may vary. Another major expense of the Queen is the upkeep of her residences. Out of all the palaces of the British royal family, the Buckingham Palace is the one that's usually used quite often. And hence, the upkeep of this palace is usually a top priority. In fact, it has been calculated that more than $28 million has been spent on the upkeep of this palace over the years. With great status comes the need for a great amount of security. If you've seen the Queen in real life or in pictures, she's always surrounded by intense security. The amount of security that's seen can easily make one guess the amount spent towards this cost. Although there hasn't been any average security expense amount released, Forbes has stated that the Queen as well as the royal family spent a whopping $2.7 billion per annum. This was the number prior to the pandemic, and surely that has changed by now. The royal family prefers to keep the amount they spend on security under wraps, as revealing it could endanger the individuals that are being protected. And now, for the best expense of the Queen's, her jewels. The Queen has been gifted quite a few sets of beautiful jewels over the years, and has even spent her own money in getting some for herself. She has a personal collection that's said to hold a value of $39 million, and all of it is kept safely in a vault under the Buckingham Palace. All in all her jewels are said to be worth somewhere between $4 billion to $6 billion. So these are the list of expenses you can find in the balance sheet of the royal accounts. Queen Elizabeth II really knows how to live a combination of a frugal and luxurious lifestyle, and that is what makes her quite the queen to look up to.